Today we are going to talk about how to achieve lower pitched feminine sounds. Now, we're not going to go too rigorous or too theoretical or too technical in this video. We're just going to have fun. We're going to play with our voice. We're going to make sounds. I want you to follow me through this, and we're going to try our best to keep it simple. We just did a 4-hour-long workshop over on our Patreon, which you can access if you're interested in the new model and all the updated information that I teach and that we teach here at TransVoiceLessons. We will be turning that model into a set of free videos available on the YouTube channel. However, given the depth and the amount of information contained in that, it's going to take a while till we get all the way through that. So I figure instead of waiting till we uncover and unveil all of that, let's just get vocally active and play with our voices. So first off, the reason why a lot of people get confused with lower pitch feminine voices to begin with is because of this idea of, well, it's at a low pitch. How could we possibly make it sound feminine? But the reality is the actual height of our pitch, how high or low the voice is, that doesn't really have that strong of a bearing over if it sounds more masculine or more feminine. Now, obviously, there's a pretty clear average between male and female average voices, female voices being higher, male voices being lower. But the reality is what ultimately comes off in our perception as a male or female voice is a combination of features coming together to form a greater whole that we perceive as male or female. So we want to think about the pitch as not being that important when we think about achieving lower pitched feminine voices. Ignore what you think you know about a male and female voice and a masculine and feminine tone, and just really try to engage with what you hear. Let's take action together. Let's get any crazy voice terms and concepts, throw those out for now, and let's just take action. If you're interested in the context around all this and why it works this way and what's behind all this, you can check out the 4-hour-long vocal workshop that we just recently did, where we talk about all these things in depth. And until we get to that part of our video series on the channel, I just want to keep it fun. I want to keep it light. I want to keep it actionable, and I want to engage you to listen and do, because that is where voice learning happens. So I'm going to show you an example here. When I try to go lower, starting from my feminine voice, listen to what it sounds like. So you're going to hear I'm going down in pitch, but I want us to all focus on what else we hear during that process. So here we go. You hear I'm like fighting to go lower. That is a feature that doesn't just show up because I'm low, but that's telling the ear that I'm actually tuned for much higher pitches. And that puts a background quality in the voice that tends to make the ear hear it as a lot more feminine and female and typical. So for example,
if I go like really low, like all the way down here, you can hear I'm at a fairly low pitch. I've got really, really large vocal tract, which is really low resonance. Everything about my voice should say that I'm masculine, but you hear how there's still something about it that sounds a little different.
Like the texture of my sound is different. That is actually our core priority when it comes to getting lower pitched feminine voices. And so, interestingly enough, if you can't do a higher pitched feminine voice, a lower pitched feminine voice or a really flexible lower pitched feminine voice is going to be a bit harder for you as well. A lot of people think that a lower pitched feminine voice should be easier because it's lower, but in reality it tends to be a bit more difficult because it's actually easier to recognize that combination up high and then bring it low, as opposed to finding that combination lower. So we're going to play with both of those different approaches today, and we'll keep listening. So for example,
if I come down here, this doesn't really sound that masculine. Listen to the texture of it.
It's kind of softer, but it's not breathy, it's not grainy, it's not kind of like this where it's all tight and soft. And so what often happens when people feminize in general, but especially around these lower pitched feminine voices, we tend to see two different pathways people try to take. One of them is where they're too heavy, they're too dense, it's too brassy, there's too much. So
if let's say that they're here,
if they try to like lower it here, you hear how it's got that like snappiness to it, that like rigidity, that roughness to the sound. That's what we're trying to avoid at a lower pitched feminine voice. So exercise 1, we are going to try to create a relaxed, higher pitched quality and work on dragging that higher pitch down to a lower pitch. We can call this a feminine drag down, like so. Ooh. And this is the most important part of the exercise. We have to make sure that when we make that initial higher tone, 1, it's high enough, like it's significantly higher than what we would normally do, and 2, it doesn't sound forced. So we're not right, just And once we can hear the fluidity and smoothness of that, we're trying to bring the voice lower with that quality. Listening for our lower notes to get weaker, listening for that quality to remain that we had when we first struck them. Exercise number 2. We're playing with creak, and we are going to be listening to the profile and characteristics that we hear in that creak to help us learn how to achieve that more feminine element across the board. We can achieve that more feminine creak at the higher pitches. We can also do it at the lower pitches. So we're going to use creak as a way to listen for what we're looking for and then bring that down back to that lower pitch context. Also, this opens up our ears so that then, if you're already a bit lower pitched with your fem voice anyways, you can listen to the creak that shows up incidentally around your voice at the ends of phrases or on certain words. And if you listen carefully, you might be able to detect this problem that's ultimately making the voice sound more masculine and limiting you to that quality. So let's all try to do this. I'm gonna make a creaking sound, like a creaky board, and I want you to mimic me. So let's try this. Now, if you're doing that on your end, I want you to detect if you're doing it this way, or if you're going, that second one, we don't want to start with, okay? So play around and try to get that basic creak at first for this action and exploration. Basically, what we're trying to do is the difference between something like this to something like this. Hear how that's a lot shallower, it's not digging in as much, it's not as spiky. We're trying to get that in our creak, because if we hear that in our creak, and if we get that in our creak, it's suggesting to us that we are tuned for a much higher pitch range, which then naturally, if we talk at the lower part with that quality, that's going to be sounding like a lower pitched female voice. So that is one really fun exploration that we can use to kind of understand what makes it so different at low pitches between a masculine and feminine voice. And I challenge you to listen for this in the voices around you. If you hear lower pitched feminine voices that you like a lot, listen to the depth when they do creak at the ends of sentences compared to when more masculine voices do. So for example, I'll try to start from a masculine voice and I'll go up in pitch and listen to how it sounds sort of squeezed and uncomfortable. Right here, you can hear how it's got that problem quality. And now if I try to go back to a lower quality here and do a lower pitched feminine voice, it's got the wrong energy to it because I've held over that problematic textural feature from the masculine element into that feminine context, and it breaks the overall effect of it. So if I do that again, starting masculine, taking it feminine, but with that masculine element still stuck in it, you can hear it doesn't sound good. Even if I go to like the lower pitch here to try to make the lower pitch feminine voice, it sounds pretty unnatural. So like if I'm here and I've got that quality and then I reduce that, you can hear how now all of a sudden my creaks become shallower, the voice sort of moves higher a lot easier, and everything sounds a lot more balanced for a lower pitched feminine voice. Exercise number 3. We're gonna start from a more masculine tone. We're just gonna repeat one word or one sound, and then we're going to try to change the characteristics of that sound. One of the key elements we're looking for is to listen for the vowel quality or the pronunciation quality that we have, and we're going to try to make that sound audibly smaller to the ear. Like for example, if I said puff, puff, it sounds very large versus For example, I'll keep it on one vowel and I'll make it go from something that sounds bigger to something that sounds smaller. So we're looking for that movement. However, since you're starting from a masculine place in this exercise, we're actually starting from E. And you can hear that spikiness that we could hear when we were playing with the creak back in the voice, which is what makes that sound so masculine there. And so this exercise is trying to not just change the size of that E and the resonance in that characteristic, but also E. Also getting rid of that extra punchiness and spikiness in the voice as well, like we did on the first 2 exercises. And in fact, let me give you an example here. If I make the E smaller or the vowel smaller to the ear, but I don't get that extra step that we got with exercises 1 and 2, it'll sound more like this. Treat. And we can hear now there's the mosquito buzzing sound. We don't want that twangy, nasal, brassy sound. And so this is a compound exercise. Do not think that just because you're doing more at once during this exercise, it's any harder or easier than any of the others. Play with this and focus on the sounds that you're trying to get. Don't try to control things in your neck or your body or anything. That's not the goal here. The goal is to listen for the effect you're trying to achieve and play with your voice and see if you can hear if you're getting closer or further. Now, another thing that is really fun to play with in lower pitched feminine voices is starting from really relaxed, really comfortable, higher pitched feminine sounds and bringing those down and trying to keep the context of that feminization. So for example, we're going to try to reach for a high pitch together. I want you to listen and see if it sounds like you're forcing it or fighting it or laboring for it. We want to be really relaxed, like so. And then once it's got that smoothness and relaxation, then we're going to try to bring that down to a lower pitch and keep that smooth texture to it. 1, 1, 2, 3, 4. Here now I've got that quality, sounds smooth, it's got that effect to it. This is what it sounds like if you're making the mistake. So if I start sort of a bit less comfortable and as I go down I add more that we don't want, it'll sound like this. Ooh. Here I went down in pitch, it's almost like I added the buzziness back in, or I added that intensity or that squeeze back into the sound, that element that we were focusing on earlier. And so we'll try and do that again and not let that element come back in. You hear how those low tones start to sound almost forced or strained on their own? But wait, I thought I had a masculine voice, or I thought I was male. So how natural or comfortable or relaxed or efficient our low notes or high notes feel is up to how we approach those notes. So notice that all of these different exercises we've explored, there's a range of different lower pitched feminine voices we can get. Like we can get like lower pitched feminine voices that tend to be a little bit like heavier like this and have a bit more intensity to them.
We can also get lower pitched feminine voices that are more like this, giving a little bit of an Elizabeth Holmes energy.
If you're familiar with her, she was the CEO of Theranos. Long story short, she became kind of infamous for the fact that she actually masculinized her voice and took it a lot lower. Now, of course, because she wasn't actually trying to sound male, she was just trying to garner more professional support and credibility in the boardroom, which I'm sure was filled with men, she naturally took her voice a lot lower. We hear this from a lot of other business professional women. I actually work with some students who are cis women who want to learn how to lower their voice so that they can have more authority in different social contexts. Now, Elizabeth Holmes' voice is actually an amazing example of what we've been demonstrating in this video, because
she's got this quality where she's kind of boxy like that. And you can hear though, even though it's lower and I've got that larger space, like it sounds like I've got a big toot.
I've got a big voice down there or whatever. The texture of it is not that harsh. It's got that smoothness in the profile of the sound that we've demonstrated with the creak. We demonstrated with the higher clean sound being dragged down, all those different contexts.
And so like that's actually a pretty fun thing to play with if you want to learn how to also get your voice higher but also play with lower pitched feminine voices, is to try to get that Elizabeth Holmes.
It almost sounds like a very relaxed yawn. So if I were to yawn like this, that's not what we want. That's going to be the thing that makes it tend to sound more masculine. If we yawn in that smoother way, it'll sound a bit more like this.
Okay, yeah, and then I've got, hear how puffy that is, and then I can make that a little bit more neutral. And here's when you're gonna get like an Elizabeth Holmes type voice. Now she had a little bit less of that, so she'd have something like this where it would kind of come through. And so you can play with these kinds of sounds as well. They're really fun to explore.
There are also other variations of lower pitched feminine voices in which, for example, we could actually be very breathy while we're smooth, and like now we have like something that's a little bit more like this, which tends to read a bit like sultrier. So those are inherently sort of an extra produced voice. They tend to have a lot of compression. They tend to be close to a microphone. The breathiness makes it so that we can keep the voice together and keep the voice flowing without the creak. So there you have it. There are 3 simple explorations that you can take with you to start considering playing and exploring lower pitched female and feminine sounding voices. So that's all for this video. Thank you all so much for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Leave a comment down below if you have any questions, concerns. If you'd like to support the work we're doing, check us out on Patreon. There's also a ton of extra information there. As I said in the beginning, I just did that 4-hour-long workshop, which really goes into the nuts and bolts of the newest model. I have not talked about that or taught that anywhere else other than my private lessons and my newest group class, and so I'm so eager to bring that here on the channel and share it with you all. But I just want to make sure that the video is supreme quality compared to anything else that we've made, and those videos will be extensive. I mean, we're looking at dozens of parts, maybe a 40-part series. Who knows how big it's going to be? I mean, it took me 4 hours to lecture on it, and I only got like a third of the way through the model on the first lecture. We'll be having those regular voice workshops about each month on the Patreon, so if you'd like to be a part of those and get a lot more in-depth information, join us there until we can finish it and publish it here. Thank you all so much, and have a beautiful rest of your day. Take care. Bye.